Welcome to the Engineering with Nature podcast. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been working on the Engineering with Nature initiative since 2010, working and collaborating to advance the use of natural processes and systems to deliver a broad range of economic, environmental, and social benefits. EWN develops and implements nature-based solutions for water and infrastructure projects. It brings together a growing international community of practitioners, scientists, engineers, and researchers to harness the power of nature to innovate and solve problems and create sustainable solutions. This podcast tells their stories. Now here's your host, Sarah Thorne of Decision Partners.
What if a whole nation turned its focus to investing in nature to solve the critical challenges posed by climate change? That's what we're talking about today. Welcome to Season 5, Episode 2. Todd Bridges, Senior Research Scientist for Environmental Science with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and National Lead of the Engineering with Nature program, and I are very pleased to welcome two guests from the White House. Our guests are two of the co-chairs of Opportunities to Accelerate Nature-Based Solutions report, which was released November 8th, 2022. Heather Tallis is the Assistant Director for Biodiversity and Conservation Sciences in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And Lydia Olander is the Director of Nature-Based Resilience for the White House Council on Environmental Quality. Welcome, Lydia.
Thank you. Very much appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Todd, Heather, and Lydia were faced with a very big challenge and a very, very tight timeline.
Indeed, they were. The president issued an executive order on Earth Day in 2022, Executive Order 14072, which is entitled Strengthening the Nation's Forests, Communities, and Local Economies. Section 4 of that executive order was entitled Deploying Nature-Based Solutions to Tackle Climate Change and Enhance Resilience. One of the provisions of that Section 4 called for an interagency report identifying opportunities for greater deployment of nature-based solutions across the federal government, including through potential policy guidance and program change. And Heather, Lydia, and a colleague of theirs, Crystal Lehman, were charged with leading the process of engaging the key federal agencies, including the Army Corps of Engineers, and developing the report. And they did so in record time. And I and my colleagues at the Engineering with Nature program had the opportunity to participate with them in that process. It was really a massive undertaking, I would say, and I was very impressed with the way in which they discharged their responsibilities to deliver that report.
It is a terrific report. Before we dig into the report and the key recommendations, it'd be really interesting to hear a bit about your backgrounds and how you got to go to the White House. So Lydia, let's start with you. You came to the White House almost a year ago.
Yes, I came to the Council on Environmental Quality from Duke University. At Duke, I'm part of an environmental policy team at the Nicholas Institute for Energy, Environment, and Sustainability, where we work directly with decision makers to provide information that supports their work. And for many years, my team has been working with state and federal agencies to better integrate nature into the policy and investment decisions that they make. And more recently, we've been working on climate resilience as well. And this is very similar to the work underway by the Biden administration, which led to the opportunity for me to come to the White House and participate.
A marvelous opportunity for you. Heather, you've been in your role at the White House since August 2021.
Yes, most of my career has actually been in the nonprofit world and in conservation. And I've been focused on bridging natural and social sciences and bringing that to real world decisions. I've mostly worked with conservation organizations like the Nature Conservancy and universities to help people who are making decisions either in governments or in the private sector and companies. The main point of that work has really been that people often think of nature as something far away or distant, definitely not relevant to what they consider, quote, important things, like the economy or health or national security. But that's definitely not the case. Nature is right here in all of our lives every day. And so that's been the focus of my work, to emphasize those connections. So I was very excited to have the opportunity to bring that perspective to the White House, to the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and make sure that the science and the evidence that we have about connections between nature and the priorities of the Biden-Harris administration is really being used, because we can actually achieve some of the very ambitious goals that have been set out on issues like climate change and jobs and equity.
As Lydia and Heather have just introduced, I think we're in a very interesting and important change or evolution within people's thinkings and society generally, rather than predominantly thinking about nature as a source of threat, where the creatures live that might eat you, and therefore something to be conquered or overcome, or not thinking about nature as particularly important or relevant when compared to human technology. I think there's really right now a growing and encouraging awareness that nature with its ecosystems is the foundation, the source and supply. It is the economy, really, when you get down to it.
So it's such an interesting time. And we're talking about this on 2 other episodes. We're talking about, this is the first show we're doing, talking about this report, but then we're talking about the value of nature, and then we're talking about how to measure that value. So I think it's really an unprecedented time to see all of the pieces coming together. And you have such an opportunity now to put your backgrounds and your expertise, but also your passions together to develop this nature-based solutions report, which is really foundational. But boy, oh boy, what a task. You basically had from Earth Day, April 22nd, until November 8th to bring the federal agency partners together to figure out the priorities and develop your report. So let's talk about the process. I'm interested in hearing how it went.
We actually started by listening, which can be a good way to run a fast process. We started out by asking a really key question about where we stand now with nature-based solutions, because the situation can seem like a little bit of a mystery. We have a lot of examples, across federal agencies and across communities of how nature-based solutions can work, what they look like on the ground, that they can be effective. But despite that, adoption has really seemed stuck at a low level. We aren't seeing nature-based solutions just take off, and that's a bit of a mystery. As an example of this, one of the Office of Science and Technology Policy's deputy directors, Dr. Alondra Nelson, visited New York and New Jersey earlier this year to see some of these nature-based solutions underway. She visited some parks and greenways and coastal marshes that have been restored to help reduce flooding and to help cities deal with stormwater. She saw these nature-based solutions, and she saw how the communities were excited about them and loved talking about them, saw that they had created local jobs. And she said, why isn't everyone doing this? And that is the question that we started with. We asked our agency partners, and we held some public roundtables, and we held a tribal consultation to ask people, what's hard about nature-based solutions now? Why isn't everyone using them? And we learned a lot from that process. And we learned that there's a ton of interest out there from the public to do more, and that there are still real barriers that make it hard to use nature-based solutions. So that was our starting point. And then we worked with agencies to find ways to remove some of those barriers.
Lydia, talk about some of the things that you heard and some of the things that you saw in your engagement.
Yeah, so I think one thing that's interesting is nature-based solutions it's a very kind of broad umbrella for lots of different kinds of actions where we manage or restore nature for various different benefits it provides to people. And so it can be forest restoration activities, building a living shoreline with oyster reefs, or constructing green roofs. And some of these are traditional land use management activities. Others involve new ways of applying nature combined with our built environment. And so as a result of that, there are many different federal agencies that have an interest in this from different perspectives. And so we're bringing in a very broad coalition of agencies like Forest Service and Department of Interior, which do land management, We have water management agencies like the Army Corps and the Bureau of Reclamation and Environmental Protection Agency doing both water quantity and water quality work. We have those that focus on hazard reduction and building resilience, like the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and those that build infrastructure, like Housing and Urban Development and Department of Transportation. So there's a really wide range of interests, all of whom have a different kind of application of nature-based solutions that they're interested in. And one of the things that we found, as Heather said, there's a lot of examples out there, and we were able to pull together examples across all of these different agencies. We have a resources guide that came out at the same time as our report that has 30 different examples, 2 from each agency that we talked with, showing how they have applied nature-based solutions or worked with nature-based solutions in different ways. And they span this whole kind of suite of examples. And despite that diversity, which is wonderful, we had a set of common themes and challenges arise from our conversation that Heather just alluded to. And those kind of challenges are really the focus of our report. How can the federal agencies start to kind of address those challenges and get us from this broad set of examples to something that's much broader scale and widespread, so that nature-based solutions are a regular solution that everybody's going to, instead of the one-off example that everybody likes to point to.
But there are many technical aspects to the challenge, certainly, and people with science or technical backgrounds like Heather and Lydia and I are inclined to think about the technical aspects of the opportunity to challenge first. But there's also an important kind of messy human part of this as well. You're dealing with different perspectives and values and priorities while you're trying to move process and procedure and practice forward. There's a lot of hard work there because of the people part of this. And our experience in the Engineering with Nature program over the last 12 years is similar to other efforts on nature-based solutions, where we need to address the technical part and the human dimension of the challenge at the same time. So I've sometimes said that about 20% of the challenge with respect to nature-based solutions is technical, and about 80% of it is a people problem. It's working with people from different aspects. The positive news is, I think, that an increasing number of people from diverse walks of life and professions and communities are committed to making progress on nature-based solutions. In fact, I'd say they're hungry for it. So there's a motivation now that maybe just a few or several years ago wasn't as well developed.
It really is an amazing effort. And honestly, I have to say it's an excellent report. So let's talk a bit about the report. Maybe, Lydia, you could give us an overview of the highlights and talk about the bottom line. What did you find?
Yeah. So what we found is, as we mentioned before, that these nature-based solutions are achieving lots of benefits, but not achieving the scale. So there's a lot of untapped opportunities for these nature-based solutions to achieve climate mitigation. We know that forests in the U.S. absorb about 10% of our annual greenhouse gas emissions already, but there are a number of other habitats, coastal habitats, rangelands, et cetera, that could also contribute to mitigation. So there's more we could do on the mitigation side. We also know that these nature-based solutions can support climate adaptation. There are studies that show that restoration of coastal habitats in Florida and Puerto Rico can reduce coastal storm damages, saving hundreds of millions of dollars every year. At the same time, these nature-based solutions help to reduce loss of wildlife and other benefits of nature, many other social and economic benefits. So at this point, we're investing a lot in various different tools to address climate change. We have a number of policies and practices like energy efficiency, renewable energy, and electric vehicles that we're really focused on. But nature-based solutions should also be a tool in that toolbox, and it should be at the same level of these other tools. It's providing a lot of the same benefits and many others. And so with this report, we're really trying to raise nature-based solutions up as another tool that has to be in this climate toolbox to help us reach our climate mitigation goals, but also to help our communities adapt to climate change and maintain all these various critical benefits that nature provides. And it was really fantastic to see at the Sharm el-Sheikh at the climate conference this year, that there's a new international partnership that's being launched with the same goal. So it's great to see, other countries also moving forward and moving out on nature-based solutions and trying to move forward with a similar goal and similar ideas in mind. At this point, I think there's a broad acknowledgement that we're really ready to step up and scale up nature-based solutions. And so I think it's time with this report and other actions to accelerate the use of nature-based solutions.
Heather, I wanted you to comment on that because I see that you're nodding your head.
Yes, I'll just reiterate, the report just makes the clear point that nature-based solutions should be a go-to option for addressing our main challenges like climate change and building strong economies. And with this report, we clearly know how to get there. The report gives a set of clear actions and recommendations that federal agencies and partners can take now and really set us on that path to unlocking the full potential of nature-based solutions.
Agencies like the Corps of Engineers or others who are charged with delivering service or projects of a particular type, I think the future for such agencies is what I might call kind of nature-first thinking. Nature-first thinking, where we're thinking about how can nature help here before we decide, what action we need to take as people. And in that nature-first thinking needs to become intentional, really a thoughtful choice that's made by organizations. One of the attitudes, if you will, that maybe became kind of embedded in our consciousness or in society through the age of enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution is that technology is the solution to every problem. Well, there are many situations where the solution is to simply get out of nature's way. Or, if you will, lend Mother Nature a helping hand to develop a nature-based solution that can be integrated with human engineering. That's a change of thinking that needs to inform our future strategies.
It's a paradigm shift. And to Lydia's point, it's really exciting to hear that there are a whole bunch of people that are thinking the same thing around the world. It's all coming together. There's a real movement forward in the integration of nature and nature-based solutions. So into solving some of these big problems like climate change. I want to talk about the report and the strategies that you're offering for advancing nature-based solutions. And Heather, maybe you could walk us through those.
Sure. So in the report, we focused on 5 strategic areas for action, and they really cover the spectrum of what go under the purview of federal agencies' options for creating change. So that covers policies, funding, federal assets that we directly manage through federal agencies, the workforce, and research and knowledge. I'll say just quickly what the focus on each of those is in the report. On updating policies, what Todd's talking about was starting with the idea that nature can be part of the solution is certainly not business as usual yet. And because of that, our current policies can sometimes unintentionally get in the way. We identified places across the federal agencies that were involved, where policies on things like permitting or benefit cost analysis can right now make it harder to use a nature-based solution than a more conventional one. So recommendations there on updating policies make it easier and pave the way for nature to be that first thought and the first choice. Unlocking funding is critical. Once policies are supportive, there needs to be enough funding there to actually build the nature-based options. And here there are some really clear recommendations that we shared for how to use existing funds differently, especially, for example, in the recent bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. These are huge opportunities that support infrastructure where nature can play a role, but usually doesn't. So recommendations there on how to pivot those existing funds. There are many opportunities highlighted in the report for how we can lead with federal facilities and federal assets. The federal government owns over 300,000 buildings. That's a lot of buildings. and manages millions of acres of land and coasts and oceans. And so we've also identified ways that the government could lead by example with those assets, like doing more with green building or green roofs and stormwater management. We also identified specific recommendations on training the workforce. Once funding is there, we need a workforce that can build nature-based options. Building and maintaining a wetland or a green roof, for example, is pretty different than mowing grass or replacing shingles on a roof. So we have recommendations for how we can support good jobs for nature-based solutions to really build that pipeline. And finally, of course, the world is ever changing, and so we need continuous innovation and learning. So there are priorities for research and knowledge generation, recommendations for how we can make sure that we are constantly building cutting-edge solutions in America. And those together, those 5 areas are what make up this roadmap in the report for unlocking the full potential of nature-based solutions.
In short, there's a lot to do, or maybe better, there's plenty of opportunity to engage and contribute. And when you think about this set of challenges and opportunities, you can think of it at an organizational level, how each of these, buckets, these 5 buckets that Heather just described relate to a given agency. But I also like to think about these in terms of the individual level, because that's where action happens when an individual takes on some initiative, and works to make progress. And I think there's plenty of space in what Heather just described for individuals, to pick a need that's relevant and motivating to them and just get started, dig in, do something.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about taking action. The policy implications of these recommendations are ostensibly for the federal agencies as a first pass. Lydia, how do you see the agency partners actioning these? What can they do now?
Yeah, so digging in a little bit deeper from Heather's overview, we had a number of recommendations on the funding and policy side of things that agencies could do. So explicitly including nature-based solutions in funding opportunities. So right now, it's not always clear that nature-based solutions are an option in different federal funding programs. So making that explicit in the language that this is not only allowed, but maybe encouraged where possible. And it may even be possible in some cases to prioritize nature-based projects. So one example of that is the Federal Emergency Management Agency's BRIC program, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, where they actually score projects for nature-based solutions. They get an extra bump up in their scoring if they include nature-based options. So where possible, including that is another thing. So just trying to embed this into the funding process. There's formula funds that federal agencies give out that states administer, and those are pretty large pools of funding. Example of those are EPA's state revolving funds, and working with states to better incorporate nature-based solutions into these programs through guidance or training and resources to help state governments implement nature-based solutions and integrate that into their programs would also be valuable. Another opportunity is to coordinate funding opportunities for greater impact. For example, if you can think about it in a watershed, a single project may not have all the impact we'd like, but if we have large projects or multiple impacts in a watershed, we could not only help to reduce flood risk and improve water quality benefits, but also support many species in a watershed. So trying to coordinate federal action so that we can have more impact than a single project could. Another piece is technical assistance. It's very hard for smaller communities, for historically underrepresented communities, and many others to kind of access these funds and get what they need. And so one of the things that we really need is to think about technical assistance programs that are driven by the needs of these communities and ensure that nature-based solutions are one of the solutions on the table for those communities. So trying to create those kinds of technical assistance programs. And on the policy side, there's a planning process for many different pieces of federal programs. There's environmental reviews, there's regulatory analysis, there's things like reviewing projects for construction in floodplains. And for all of these, including nature-based alternatives or options in that planning process. So making, again, that explicit as one of the front and center, nature is one of our options, is a key piece there. And as Heather mentioned, we need to improve the way we account for nature. So our benefit cost analysis and similar methods that are used in policy and planning decisions really need to better account for nature's benefits, which will improve the way nature-based solutions move through those processes. And finally, permitting and review processes. We need to make those as efficient as possible for nature-based solutions. This is one of those cases where people have put a number of these processes in place to stop development from harming environment, and then we're putting a nature project, which is an environmental project, in place, and it has to undergo those same permitting requirements, and can make it very difficult in some cases. So national and general permits and programmatic review processes where possible are helpful, but also just coordination. So getting state and other jurisdictional agents and other like local jurisdictions with the federal agencies together in coordinated permitting activities that incorporate expertise in nature-based solutions. So making sure that someone in that team has the knowledge and understands these could help move permitting forward more efficiently. And work is underway in a number of these already, and we hope the report will encourage agencies to advance the recommendations even further.
I mean, as Lydia has outlined, there are many opportunities to shape and mold, evolve, transform, even in some cases, I think the approaches that we take to elevate and expand the value that nature can provide to individual people and society as a whole. Interventions, investments, projects, solutions are pursued to produce value as an outcome. And one question you might ask, well, what kind of value and for whom? And answering that two-part question, that's got a lot of layers to it. And in the context of how projects are planned, also how we engage with communities and stakeholders where for a project will be, how you develop partnering opportunities to fund or finance a project, for example, in the context of, say, a public-private partnership for a nature-based solution. Also, how you would design and engineer a project. It affects everything. What this progression of activities that Heather and Lydia have outlined.
So there's a lot of things that you're recommending that people could do now. So before we wrap up, I'm thinking about the people from a broad range of organizations who are reading your report. They might be highly motivated to start taking action now. Lydia, kick us off here. What could they do right now?
Yeah, so starting to just think about folks at the state and local levels and what roles they can play. I think a lot of the recommendations in the report that we suggest federal agencies do are also relevant at the state and local level. So as I mentioned before, for example, for permitting, it's really necessary that the state and local permitting have the same abilities to move forward as the federal government. So coordinating on these activities, incorporating nature-based experts in the group, or including training in nature-based solutions could all help move those types of projects through the permitting process more efficiently, especially if they're a newer type of project that are not as familiar to those involved in the permitting process. Another thing we talked about, I mentioned previously, is the formula funding program. So that's a place where states are implementing those funds. And so those could be Department of Transportation grants for rural areas, AmeriCorps programs, or HUD's community development block grants, or many different kinds of programs that are implemented at the state level, where nature-based solutions can be an option explicitly in those programs, and there can be technical assistance for communities interested in them. So states can very much play an active role in making sure that happens with those kinds of programs. State and local governments can work with a bunch of the existing federal programs, like NOAA's Climate Adaptation Program partnerships, and there's also a Partnership for Sustainable Communities. A number of these federal groups that are providing technical support for communities to address climate resilience and climate adaptation that could work with those communities on implementing nature-based solutions and evaluating how that could be a useful tool for state and local governments. And the other thing I think that's really useful is to think about the role of state and local governments in disaster recovery. They play a major role in that, and there are significant opportunities for nature-based options to be incorporated into protection and restoring communities after disaster and making them more resilient to future disasters.
I'm so glad you said that. Having listened to the local municipal folks talking after Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Fiona about we need to get rebuilding. We need to, rebuild our reinforcements, reinforce our communities. I kept thinking about what about the nature-based solutions? How do we build those in? So I'm glad that you are addressing that explicitly in your report. Heather, how about you? What are some of the examples of things that people can do right now to take action?
Yeah, so building on that example you just gave, when people are ready to build, we identified in the report some gaps in the workforce and in research in our understanding of how to effectively build all the different kinds of nature-based solutions. And so there are a set of opportunities here along the whole spectrum of education. We can really think about grade schools to universities, building new curriculum that helps people see how nature matters, in their lives, in disaster response, in clean drinking water, in health, in any of the aspects where nature has a role to play. And that can really help us build the foundation of skills that we need in the workforce, to design and maintain nature-based solutions. There's also some really clear roles that the private sector can play here to complement public action. As an example, some companies and professional societies already lead on certification and standards. For example, lead certification of green buildings or site standards for landscaping and site management that incorporate nature-based options. These standards make clear what the strong skills and design principles are that are needed so that the workforce can grow. And we definitely need more of this to really be able to fully build and design and implement the full set of nature-based solutions. In general, I think any organization can look through the recommendations and think about their own programs against these and see where they can link up and act now.
Yeah, maybe I'll just highlight one of the points that Heather made first, paraphrase George Washington Carver, and say that, education is the key to unlocking a better future. It's true also for nature-based solutions. And education includes supporting current practitioners, retooling and training with new capabilities, but also developing the practitioners of the future, today's students, with new curricula and coursework, so they have the skills to deliver and to partner, with nature and in the development of nature-based solutions. And, on the point that Lydia was making so well with regard to organizational activities, I think we need to find ways in which, while organizations develop their capabilities internally, that they're also developing the capacity to work beyond their boundaries. Organizations working with other organizations, and Lydia and Heather have been hitting on that during our discussion here. So we're able to join knowledge sources and join experience and join, complementary resources and means of delivery across organizations. And by doing that, we'll make more progress together. Progress is going to be proportional to partnering in that sense. You're joining the best of what organizations have and their strengths together to do this.
And continuing to innovate. We often talk about the importance of students and the students today, inspiring the students today, giving them the skills and tools they need to be successful. That's really key to the future of really a word that we've used on other podcasts, really mainstreaming nature-based solutions, maybe making it part of all of our thinking in any project.
Well, in addition to it inspiring students, provide opportunities for students to inspire the non-students or to inspire us. I mean, I had an opportunity just a few days ago to spend some more time with students. And the more I do, the more encouraged I am about the future as it relates to engineering with nature and nature-based solutions.
So this has been very interesting. Thank you, Heather and Lydia, for your hard work and for your dedication in creating this roadmap for nature-based solutions. I think that your work is inspiring. I think it's also going to be transformational. It's really thought leadership, but combined with practical actions that can be implemented immediately. And to Todd's point, by individuals as well as by organizations. So it's been a real pleasure to have you on the Engineering with Nature podcast.
Well, thank you very much. It's been wonderful to be with you today. I just want to directly thank Todd and the Army Corps for really leading in this space for years and giving us a strong basis to build on. And I'm excited to see what we can do together now and making nature-based solutions our first choice. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to be part of this. The Engineering with Nature program has definitely been a leader that's been a great partner as we've pulled together this report. So thank you for inviting us to join you today for this conversation.
Yeah, and I want to thank Heather and Lydia too, because they just did with their team just a fantastic job on the report. And working with Heather and Lydia and their colleagues has been very encouraging to me personally as well as professionally. The product is wonderful. It's fantastic. And great work was done in delivering this report. And I really appreciate them joining us today to have this conversation and to really celebrate the product of so much effort across the agencies. Thank you very much.
Indeed. Thank you, Lydia. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Todd. It's been an inspiring way to wrap up the year, and hopefully we'll see lots of nature-based solutions coming into play in 2023. To all of you, thank you so much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we hope you'll join us again as we talk about engineering with nature.
The EWN podcast was developed by Sarah Thorne and Jeff King, Deputy National Lead, Engineering with Nature Initiative, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. For more information, you can visit our website, engineeringwithnature.org. The EWN podcast is produced by Eye Contact Productions for the Engineering with Nature program within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm Dave Trafford.